set up. Okay, so with that, I'm going to turn it over to my colleague and friend, Frank Cowell, who I've known for a number of years, actually. I'm sure he'll introduce himself, but he's the CEO of Digitopia. And he's spoken, this will be, I think, the third time he's spoken to our group over the last, 10 years.
Yeah, I think
And
so.
yeah, just done a phenomenal job every single time. So I'll introduce you, Frank. Why don't you go ahead and get started?
Yeah, thanks for having me, Ken. I'm excited to be here with everybody today. The breakout rooms, I'd never actually been in a breakout room on a Zoom before, so that was super cool. Got to meet Debbie and Brian, so that was fun. I enjoyed that. Looking forward to presenting here for you folks today. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. So just give me thumbs up and confirmation if everything is good
Yeah,
and you can see
perfect.
my screen. I went to full screen mode. You can still see it, right?
Mhm.
Good. Yes. Okay, good. We are in business. Okay. So today we're going to talk about revenue operations, as Ken has been mentioning, and we're going to talk about why it's the missing link in your growth plan. And I have 7 specific tips or takeaways for you guys. If you've been to any of my talks before, you'll know that most of my talks, I like to have them center around strategy. I try not to get too much into tactics. For me, it doesn't excite me. I don't find a ton of value in communicating that stuff because you can kind of Google it and find out all the tactical stuff all day long. And so I try to be as strategic as possible. But today I actually have a number of tactical things that you can go and implement right away. And I think that's really important when it comes to a topic like revenue operations. If you investigate this topic, what you're going to find is you're going to find a lot of smart sounding information, but it's really shallow. It's not very deep. There isn't actually a lot of real specificity around how do you actually go about doing quote unquote revenue operations. And so I'm really excited about the fact that myself, through a book that I wrote, which I'm going to tell you about in a moment, through my firm, we've actually put in a lot of work to create a framework around this and an actual playbook to follow so you can know how to actually quote unquote do revenue operations. So again, I'm Frank Cowell. I'm the CEO of Digitopia. I'm an author of a book called Building Your Digital Utopia, and I also speak locally and nationally on subjects related to revenue operations, brand positioning, sales, marketing, authority, and whatnot. I'd love to connect with you guys after today. So if there's anything that I wasn't able to get to, you have additional questions that we weren't able to answer, just connect with me either on the socials or at my email. Email, honestly, is pretty much the easiest way to reach me, frank@digitopia.agency. But on a lot of the socials, I'm at Frank Cowell. So please connect with me either way if you want to continue talking about this stuff. I want to give a huge,
Frank,
yeah.
apologize for interrupting. I forgot to ask in the beginning. I assume it's okay for folks to ask questions in the chat during your presentation. Is that okay if I moderate that for you?
Yeah, absolutely. If you want to just
Yes.
pepper them at me, because I probably won't have it on my screen here.
Sure, no problem. Yeah, I'll
Yeah.
look at it. I'm sorry I didn't ask that in the beginning. I apologize.
No, I'm good with questions.
Great.
And so we have a lot of content to get through. So I might go fast, folks, because I'd rather save time for those questions and make sure we have enough time for that. But I just want to acknowledge you guys today for taking time out of your day. In any given normal environment, it takes a lot to break away from your task list, break away from your calendar, and spend time to work on your business. And so, especially now during the crazy 2020 that we've had, which has been something of an anomaly and something that I don't think anyone would have ever expected. It takes a lot for everyone to show up today. So I just want to acknowledge all of you. I'm the guy that's, speaking on this topic today, but you guys really deserve the huge shout out because you're taking the time to work on your business. 3 things I want to cover today. I want to talk about, what is revenue operations? Again, I think there are definitions out there, and I think a lot of them sound really great in theory, but I want to break down, in a simple set of words what I think revenue operations is. We're going to talk about how it can help you create internal alignment. And then I want to leave you guys with 3 ways you can lead the charge to create a culture of revenue, because ultimately we want to help you crush the competition. So that's what I aim to accomplish today. Again, along the way, please feel free to ask questions. Hey, so by show of hands, I don't know if you want to raise your hand or use that little feature there, which I just learned about, by the way. You can actually raise your hand or clap or do whatever. If any of this sounds familiar, either you've said it or you've heard it in your organization, our process isn't working. We can't generate revenue consistently. Our MQLs are crap. I wish I knew how to unlock growth. Our team seems disjointed. And so on. Our data and tools are a mess. There's got to be a better way to do this. So anyone experiencing this at all or have experienced this, if these are the kinds of things that you're hearing in your organization or the sentiments you're feeling, then, revenue operations might be something that you want to consider as a way to kind of cure some of those systemic things that are going on in the business. So let's ask the question, what is revenue operations? So here's my definition of what it is it's a business function that aims to maximize an organization's revenue potential by driving full funnel accountability through the alignment of marketing, sales, and service across process, platform, and people. And so the big themes here that I want to kind of point out is that it's a business function, much like the major functions of any business being marketing, sales, operations, admin, and finance. Those are the 5 core common functions. You might throw R&D in there as a 6th function if it doesn't live under marketing, for example. Revenue operations is quickly becoming its own business function. And oftentimes it's becoming a right hand to either the COO or the CEO. It's its own business function that's starting to emerge. And the whole goal of this role is to maximize revenue potential. And so what that requires is looking across the entire life cycle. I think what you'll find if you start looking into revenue operations, a lot of firms will lean much more into this idea that it's kind of just marketing, or lean much more into this idea that it's technology, when in reality, it's about the entire life cycle of what your customers experience. And how do you maximize the potential across that entire set of interactions? So that way you're maximizing the organization's throughput. And then how is that done? Aligning marketing, sales, and service on specifically process, platform, and people. And we're going to dive into that today and unpack this statement here. If you look at other people and how they're defining it, it's not just me pointing, defining it this way. Recent Forbes article, for example, talks about it being a full process that involves strategic convergence of sales, marketing, and customer success, or what I just described as service. Ultimately, we're trying to create faster growth and more profit. And you'll notice here that they talk about end-to-end process, and the moment a prospect considers all the way to renewal and upsell. There's that full funnel accountability. There's that full life cycle. So again, you'll hear these things being talked about, and these are the common themes. What I want to do today is, again, talk about how you go about doing this, because there isn't a lot of information out there. So that leads me to tip number 1, or secret number 1, that companies with a RevOps function in their business are typically experiencing about a 26% growth in revenue. Now, this stat comes from HubSpot, who has done a lot of analysis and deep work in this area. And they're finding that the growth in revenue is significant when this function is identified and not just relegated as, an also job of some other department on the team, but when it's its own function, 26% revenue growth. The critical idea that I've been talking about is alignment. That's the big thing that I want you guys to take away, is how do you get those teams aligned? How do you get them on the same page with process, with the tech, with the people that are and the roles that are needed? This is the big idea. Let's talk about what's driving the need. What you'll find if you start investigating this idea of RevOps is technology is a big part of the discussion, but in reality, technology has actually caused a big need. Why? Because a lot of it is just growing out of control. Right? There's just more tech implemented into our organizations today than there ever has been. And most of the tech, when you look at it on its own merit, seems like it's valuable. It seems like it's easy. It seems like it's affordable. When you start piling all this tech together, it's just growing like a weed, and it's starting to create the lack of clarity that organizations are experiencing and the lack of alignment. Gartner reports. Yeah.
Frank, can I ask a quick question?
Yeah.
Actually, a question from one of our members. And it's a great one because it talks about what you're speaking about, alignment there a moment ago also. So where does it start? Who does it start with technology, the IT team? Does it start with marketing or sales? Who is kind of the initial catalyst to get everybody, not necessarily in the same physical room, but the same room metaphorically on the same page and starting to discuss this?
So that's interesting. There was a report that came out recently that asked that question, who owns RevOps in your organization? And it was honestly spread all across the board. It would be, it was at the CEO level. It was the COO. It was in marketing. It was in sales. It was one of the findings was CFO. It was in the finance department. So I think what you're finding is there is no one hard, fast rule. However, organizations that are dedicating a person to this, it becomes its own function. It really becomes its own its own group. And this may not be a large group that grows within the company, but it certainly has a main strategist, if you will, that's doing the analytical work and bringing those teams together. Much like, Brian and I were talking about this in the breakout. For anyone who's familiar with EOS, the Entrepreneurial Operating System, they have a role called the integrator. And so this is, I would probably say, a good analogy to make, right? That it's an integrator type of role. It's an integrator type of person that would kind of lead the charge on this and kind of be its own function that sits beside marketing, sales, and service. But the three core areas that are involved are marketing, sales, and service. But again, I think organizations all tackle it differently. My suggestion that would be that it's its own identified function that sits beside those three areas.
Thank you. Thank you.
If that's helpful. Here, Gartner is saying that, a whopping 29% of the marketing budgets out there today are going towards technology, right? It's going towards the tech, yet only 12% of marketers are seeing significant value from their technologies. And so just to further illustrate the point that there's a lot of chaos being created by all of this quote unquote easy tech that we're implementing into our organizations. And let's face it, most of the tech is real easy today. You click, you sign up, you put in a few things, you put in your token, boom, you're up and running. Put a tag on your site, you got it going. But all of this is kind of piling up and creating a lot of chaos. This was from 2018. So we're talking, almost 2.5 years ago. This is what the landscape, according to chiefmartech.com, this is what the landscape of marketing, advertising, sales tech looked like back then. And it's only grown. And so if this is what you have at your disposal, not only is it confusing, but it just illustrates and supports the idea that the tech has kind of really grown out of control and creating chaos. And if you add on top of that, our desire as brands to be omni-channel, we want to be everywhere and every place for our buyers. So then that amplifies and multiplies the chaos and confusion. And oh, by the way, over 400,000 businesses are started just in the US every year alone. And 95% of them won't make it past year one, sadly. So chaos, confusion reigns, and it's ultimately this, which is a crowded, noisy world. We have too many technologies to manage too many channels with way too many competitors. And so I don't know about you, but in our industry, and I see this across many industries, it's very hard to create differentiation today. It's very hard to stand out. It's very hard to answer the question, how are you different, right? And so there's a lot of chaos in the world, very crowded, very noisy. And because of all this, organizations really are lacking direction and clarity. The organizations today are way more tactical than I've ever seen them in my entire career. And which is unfortunate because everyone's reactive instead of taking a proactive approach. And so just like Ryan Gosling here, what I want to say is, hey girl, let's fix this. Let's help you figure out how to tame this chaos and fix it once and for all. So let's talk about how it can create internal alignment. I want to dive a bit deeper now and start giving you some real specific how-to kind of stuff. So I have secrets 2, 3, and 4. And that is what I mentioned a moment ago around aligning on process, platform, and people in that order. And that's one of the big takeaways. If you're taking notes, is the alignment you want to create is process, platform, and people in that order. And I'll explain to you why here in a moment. But process is essentially your strategy. How are you going to go about creating that maximum potential with specific buyers across their entire life cycle? What platform do you have in place to support that process? And finally, what people do you have on your team to be able to make that all happen? Let's dive into that. So if we talk about that alignment and how one dictates the other, if RevOps is the entire ecosystem, process, platform, and people looks like this conceptually, where one defines the other. And with process, what we're asking is this question: how are we going to drive revenue? Platform answers the question: what tech do we need to enable that process? And finally, people is: who do we need on the team to execute the process and operate the platform? Let's dive into process. So when we talk about aligning marketing, sales, and service, by the way, today what I'm going to describe they're kind of like the minimum, right? Like if you talk about MVP, if you truly want to start diving into RevOps, it's kind of the MVP of the things that you want to be aligned on and things you want to be implementing. So when it comes to marketing, sales, and service alignment, we're talking about aligning on goals, objectives, buyer personas, what I call business math, and the experiences you're going to create for those buyer personas. I'm going to dive into each of these. Again, I'm going fast because there's a ton of material to cover, but don't hesitate to ask questions along the way. So aligning on goals and objectives, these are the kind of questions you want to ask when you get your sales, marketing, and service teams together. Where are we going? Oh, by the way, executive participation is a must, right? So like COO at minimum has to be involved in this process, along with whoever you identify as the kind of the RevOps integrator or the champion. So where are we going? What are the revenue targets? What are the KPIs? What are the supporting metrics? And what are our best opportunities? This is just a start to the kinds of questions that you want the team collectively to answer. I often find what happens in organizations, this is either answered from the sales department, or it's either answered at the executive level. And it really is not an inclusive discussion with marketing, sales, and service. One of the things I've been saying a lot lately, in fact, just recorded a new podcast episode a couple of days ago that'll be out in a week or two, where I talk a lot about this idea that where I think most companies are missing the boat is that in their operations, which is the service, which is where your product is delivered, in that area, that's the area where we're missing opportunity to drive what we sell, drive who we sell it to. That function in your business needs to have more voice and more clout. They should be the ones telling marketing and sales, I want you bringing me these types of clients, delivering these kinds of things. And so having those people at the table has long been neglected, but with revenue operations, it's a requirement that you have operations or, whoever's in charge of service, you have them there at the table and you guys collectively answer these questions and get on the same page.
Frank, a question came up from Joseph about kind of building that trust, if you will. You said that every organization that you've seen really kind of there's a different owner, a different champion to start off. But is there a certain way that you recommend that has worked in your experience in terms of how you build that trust, that collaboration? Is it more top down, bottom up, those kinds of things?
Well, I think when you go through that initial discovery, understanding what each unit and each stakeholder wants, like what are their personal goals and objectives within the organization. I think starting there and making sure that whoever's leading that charge starts with the humans, because ultimately we have to achieve, company KPIs and objectives and hit those profitability and revenue goals. But I think you have to start with the people, and I think you have to figure out what's important to them, because if you can help show that this process will help them achieve what they're responsible for achieving, I think that's critical to creating trust. The other thing is just making sure that people understand that while decision by committee is usually not a great idea, the fact that you are creating an inclusive process so that nobody's left out, everyone's voice is heard, with everyone aligning on the same goal will also start to create trust as well. And then finally, having that third, kind of like that independent person who's not in marketing, who's not in sales, it kind of alleviates the notion that maybe there's an agenda or maybe that it's biased towards one of the other departments. And so that's another way to start to create trust, is so that way those people see that revenue operations person as a peer and a partner, not just an assistant to the COO doing more top-down stuff.
Great, thank you.
If that's helpful. A key philosophy here, one of the things we talked about alignment, is efforts that in how you're going about maximizing your revenue potential need to focus on one buyer persona and one pain point at a time. And we're going to talk a little bit about what that means. But essentially, the teams need to be aligned on who are the best buyers and what are the absolute single common pain points that we overcome and we solve better than anyone else in our industry. In every company, you may have a number of line items, a number of service offerings, a number of products that you sell, but there are just a handful that you're world-class at. And when you pair that up with the best clients, then you have high retention, high margins, high repeat buys, and so on. So the marketing, sales, and service teams have to align on this. Who is starting off? Who's the one buyer persona, and what's the one pain point we solve better than anyone else in the world? And if the team can start aligning on that, then they could start to create excitement and alignment around seeing that buyer persona come into your organization, elevate into an opportunity, turn them into a customer, and ultimately a fan. So hyper specificity is really critical. And it's important that you start narrow when doing any kind of efforts like this. Start narrow. If you try to bite off too much, I guarantee you this is going to fail, especially because you're trying to do something cultural in your organization. When you're trying to make a cultural shift in your organization, Do not take that lightly. That is very difficult to do. So you have to start small. You have to take small bites. And what you're looking for aren't necessarily the biggest wins. You're looking for any win, right? You want to be able to, as a collective team, when you're creating this alignment, you want to be able to high five each other. Say, yes, we did that. We created this win. So just here's an example of what I mean about getting hyper specific on your buyer personas. I want the marketing, sales, and service teams to agree on who is this person that we want more of? What is that type of customer we want more of? And get really specific. Here's an example of a buyer persona document where we identify a buyer persona, and we bring this person to life by giving this person a name and an age and, what's important to them and who their influencers are. This is really critical that the marketing, sales, and service teams, this is just one page, guys. This is one page, by the way. We're not suggesting that you have to go out and do crazy amounts of market research and build a bunch of reports and documents that'll sit in a drawer somewhere. But just getting aligned on some very simple things is critical. Once you have that person identified, what I want you to do next is I want you to look at their journey that they go through when they become aware of their problem, when they start to consider solutions, and then finally when they're trying to make a decision between, provider A and provider B and provider C. As they go through that journey, what I want you to do is, and by the way, I look at that as problems, paths, and providers. What I want you to do is ask yourselves this question as a team: what are the issues? And I want you to write down what the unique issues and questions and concerns and points of misinformation are at each step of the way. And so you're going to have an inventory, okay? Across each of these three areas, you'll have an inventory of maybe, 12, a couple of dozen, 3 dozen. You might have several dozen issues here that you're going to identify. And those issues can be questions, it can be concerns, it could be pain points, it could be pieces of misinformation where maybe they're being miseducated in the marketplace by, other providers. And so when you write all of those down, you want to ask this question: of all of these issues, which one do they want to solve more than anything else? Right? Which issue here is most concerning for them? Which one of these issues are they most motivated to solve? And get on the phone with people and spend time in a webinar and spend time on a free consult and actually write checks to solve. Which one of these do they care most about? And I want those 3 organizations, marketing, sales, and service, the internal orgs, I want you guys to be aligned on this. And I want you guys to all be nodding your head and high-fiving and saying, yes, that's the issue. That's the issue they care about the most. And oh, by the way, that's the issue we're great at solving. When you have that kind of clarity, your team can really rally around improving your product, improving your sales and process, improving how you go to market. And oh, by the way, that should be on your buyer persona. So you'll notice here on this buyer persona document, we have the focus pain point identified. This person may have many pain points. I get that. There may be 37 different possible reasons that this person comes to you, but what is the one pain that they want to make go away more than anything else in the world? Identify that on this buyer persona document. So that way, when the 3 teams get together, you can look at this and say, yes, we are helping make this pain point go away for this person. Very, very critical that everyone has that kind of clarity. I also recommend that you do some basic business math. Gang, it's really surprising to me the number of organizations I come across that don't actually calculate down the acceptable cost of customer acquisition for each one of their targets that they want to go after. I see organization time and time again deploying expensive marketing campaigns, dumping a lot of money into Google advertising, for example, and print advertising, and they don't even know what the acceptable cost of customer acquisition is. Why is this important? It's important because if you determine for your offering, you can afford to spend $3,000 all in to acquire the client, but yet your advertising model and what you're spending will just naturally pencil out to 5 or 10,000. You're already engaging in an effort that's destined to be unprofitable. Does that make sense? And so this is very basic. And the way you're going to do that is you're just going to extrapolate out your target number of customers you want here with this buyer persona and work all your stages backwards. You guys know your conversion rates, right? You know what they are. Work that backwards to where you identify the potential number of people you need to be in front of to be able to make that target number come to life. And then when you do the math to define that out over the lifetime revenue, the gross margin to give you your lifetime value, and what your acceptable cost of acquisition is, you're going to come up with a number. This is real simple math that unfortunately most organizations just don't do. And so once you have that number, the next time some advertising firm or maybe someone in your marketing team suggests that you should be spending X amount on Google ads or print ads or what have you, just work the math and say, hey, what is the expected cost of customer acquisition going to be for this effort? Just ask that question. And if they don't know, that tells you they're not taking an objective approach to the advertising. That is red flag number one. And so knowing this number makes you very educated when it comes time to determining what efforts should you deploy. You might come to the result that you simply don't have the budget to do a certain kind of advertising. Maybe what you have to do is get a little bit more creative and go to the other end of the spectrum and start targeting your existing clientele and figuring out how you can mobilize them to be a source of referrals, a source of repeat buys, a source of increased margin, and so on. So this information is really powerful.
Frank, very kind of a tactical question, which is kind of a little granular, but from a timing perspective, is this a 90-day, 6-month project to kind of get this going and to kind of reset that mindset, or is it more longer term? And then what's kind of your recommendation in terms of what you've seen out there around how check-in meetings should go? How do you keep everybody on the same page?
Okay, great. So a few things there. How long does it take to kind of like get established and get going? So interestingly enough, we help our clients through what we call a fast start program. It's 60 days where we kind of get RevOps implemented and up and running. Now, that being said, all of this stuff is like a snowball, just like any good marketing and sales, right? Like you guys are experienced, you know this. Like if you were hired day one somewhere and you're expected to make it rain, like it's going to take time. You're going to have to build your list. You're going to have to build your relationships. You're going to have to nurture their sales cycles. So this is no different. You're going to have a cycle to this. And I would say with consistent efforts, you'll start to see upticks at 6 months. You'll see upticks at 12 months. You'll start to see another uptick at 18 and 24 months. So it's not unlike any other initiative or effort you would deploy for yourselves or for your organizations. Just to kind of get some foundational stuff set, 2 to 3 months, you can get some foundational stuff set, but that's just the beginning, right? And what I find is that it's best if working in 90-day phases, because each 90 days you can understand what the goals and objectives are. And in your very first 90 days, the goals and objectives really have nothing to do with like seeing an uptick in revenue or profitability, right? Because you're building the foundation, you're getting the team aligned, you're getting your baseline data. Then in your second quarter, what you're doing is you're now striking out and addressing a bottleneck. You're addressing a bottleneck area and saying, okay, our bottleneck happens to be in turning our customers into fans. That's actually more important, we've identified, than trying to go get new leads in the database. And we're not suggesting that you wouldn't go in to try to continue to get new leads, but the bulk of our additional effort is going towards how do we turn people into fans, because we've realized we've got a leaky bucket. That's what revenue operations does, is it helps you identify where you have a leaky bucket, where you have the bottlenecks, and each 90 days you're working on addressing those bottlenecks. So over time, it starts to snowball and you have improvement over time. How do you get people on the same page? I'm actually going to talk about that in a number of slides. And we're going to talk about a process that you guys can implement to start getting people online. This could take me a long time. I literally do, multi-day sessions on just this one slide you see here alone. But what I want you to understand is once you have that buyer persona in mind, once you know the pain point that you solve, I want you to make sure that you have a relationship-driven experience in your business model. Too many times I come across companies where they're a binary business. What do I mean by that? All they have at their disposal is you're a customer, you're not a customer. You're a client, you're not a client. You're a patient, you're not a patient. And the business isn't built to actually address the journey that person goes through, regardless if your brand is involved or not. So what I want you to do is I want you to have pieces of content. I want you to have offers. I want you to have ways to engage this person across a natural relationship progression that they're going to just go through no matter what, right? Now, let's face it, we would all here today love to put out magical advertising that only addresses ready nows, and we only ever talk to people, and the only people that ever look at our ads are people that are ready now, and the phone rings off the hook, and we close business left and right. Like, we would all love that. That's not reality. People have a progression they go through. So really simple. This is a model that you can look to and ask yourself, Do we have content that educates for people that are in that educational stage, right? And it needs to educate, not promote. You need to essentially teach them what you know. Then do we have content and do we have tools that empower people so that they can start taking action on their own to solving this problem? Do we have content that inspires them about what's possible so they can see with their own eyes what success looks like by taking the kind of action that you're teaching? You know, it's been said by marketers much greater than me and who have are much more legendary than me, that if your prospect can't see it, they can't buy it. And so I find this level of content, this inspirational content, is what's sorely missing in most organizations, especially when we talk about organizations where, actually, I'm gonna audit myself. I was gonna say, especially in like B2B organizations where they have sales cycles, but this is important even with consumer products. I mean, think about like if you're gonna sell like a barbecue grill, for example, like if you have that inspiring content so people can see themselves doing this, they see a persona that kind of resembles them, and they can see this happening, then they can start to have what's called a psychological transfer of ownership. You know, I mentioned in my breakout how in my early career, I spent some time in retail. And one of the things that we taught in retail was how to create transfer of ownership. So what we would do is if you came into the store, and I'm really dating myself, by the way, when we would like help demo a VCR to you, I really dated myself, right? What we would do is we would teach our salespeople, put the remote in their hands and you tell the customer what button to push and walk them through an experience, but let them do it. If you were demonstrating a computer, put the mouse in their hands, tell them what to do. The reason we did this is because the brain starts to then transfer the ownership. They start to believe this is mine. This is me using it. I'm already going through the process of owning this. That's what you want to do with your inspirational content. And so many organizations are really lacking in this area. A lot of organizations have case studies, but the case studies are really boring and they're all written through the lens of the brand. They're all written through the lens of, look what we did. You need to flip that and you need to make your customer the hero, right? Your Yoda, your customer is Luke Skywalker in that story. And you need to tell an inspirational story so that when people watch that, you want them to have this kind of reaction. You want them to say, I want that too. If you create the right inspirational story for people who are ready, they're going to say, I want that too. And what that does is it tees up your opportunity to engage them in a valuable way, which is the next level up in the relationship, which is if you'd like to experience that too, take this important first step. It's either let's do an assessment, let's do an audit, let's do a consultation, let's do a review of your finances. Let's do whatever that first step, foot in the door is. That's your opportunity to finally engage. And it needs to be compelling and valuable. And it needs to be connected to the previous piece of inspiration. So you create a 1-2 punch, right? You inspire them and show them what's possible. Your big sales pitch, guys, is would you like that too? If you'd like to experience that too, let's set up a time to take this important first step. Let's audit your financials and see what's possible. Let's audit your facility and see what's possible. Let's run the numbers and see what you could achieve. Right? Very simple. Like your big sales pitch doesn't have to be a sales pitch if you do the inspiration part right. Ultimately, they become a client, and what you're supposed to do with your offering is transform them. So you guys remember that focus pain point? Ultimately, they want that to go away. Ultimately, they want what they're buying from you is what's on the other side of that pain. And so what I want you guys to understand is you're never selling the thing you sell. You're never selling what's on the invoice. What you're selling is the outcome that person is looking for. It's the other side of the pain. And so if your offer is not making that transformation happen for them, then you've got an offer problem. Okay. You've got an offering problem. There's something wrong with what you're selling with your product. If you're doing that right, then you have an opportunity to elevate them and turn them into fans by doing things that go above and beyond even what they would ever expect from your brand. Again, I literally do multi-day course on teaching people how to build this into the organization. And it certainly is a big part of RevOps, right? Like getting the right content, getting the right offers down, getting the right moments of engagement, how you elevate people into fans is a part of RevOps, but it's not the only thing. And just on this alone, again, I do a multi-day engagement on this. So I went through this quickly. You guys have access to this deck. And if you have questions afterwards, please don't hesitate to let me know. Skip through that. Okay. That's your process, right? So we aligned on process. Everyone's aligned. We know what we're going after. We know who our best buyer personas are. We know the pain points that we're going to solve for them, and we're going to create a relationship-driven experience for that person. Boom. That's our process. That's our strategy at a high level. Okay. What kind of tech do we need to make all this come to life, which we call platform? So how do we align marketing, sales, and service on platform? Well, there's a few things here. There's 5 things you want to make sure happen with your technology when it comes to platform. One, you want to make sure you have relationship lifecycle tracking in your organization through your content, or through your tech. You want to make sure you have marketing attribution, contact engagement history, data standardization, and analytics. I'm going to go through each one of these. Okay, so lifecycle tracking. So a moment ago, I just showed you that relationship-driven experience. By the way, each of those goals of educate, empower, inspire, and so on align with a relationship level that they would have with your brand. And so what you see on the left here are my recommendations for relationship level names. But in your business, it might be something else. You might have a different process. This is the process I recommend, but it isn't the only one. So whatever that process is, you need to start aligning the relationship level names for each of those stages. And it's important that marketing, sales, and service agree on those. You have to agree on what those life cycles are. I can't tell you how many times I walk into an organization and what marketing thinks is an MQL qualified is not what sales thinks is an MQL qualified. Right? They're just completely disjointed. I've been in organizations where they think marketing generates SQLs. And because they haven't bothered to understand and agree, what is the difference? And so it's really important that the 3 teams align on what the relationship levels are.
Frank, question about, do you find that, to your point from a minute ago about that alignment as well, do you find more often than not that this creates kind of a common ground, or it kind of uncovers, I guess, exposes common ground that sometimes sales and marketing didn't even realize exist? Is it a way to kind of get that dialogue going, if you will?
Absolutely. And that's why, and we'll talk about when I get to the people section, the things you can do to start creating that alignment and how that starts to happen. But you're dead on. When you start asking those goal and objective questions, aligning on buyer personas, getting process aligned. When we start to get platform aligned, a lot of light bulbs go off. A lot of people go like, oh, okay, I get it. I get why that's hard. Mr. and Mrs. Marketing Department, leader. I get why that's hard, Mr. and Mrs. Sales Department leader. You start to create some common understanding and have some empathy for how difficult some of these things are to do when it comes to technology. Because sometimes you might have disparate systems, certain systems may be legacy. There's all sorts of reasons that, this can be difficult. And so you start to create some understanding among the various groups of what's possible. But then you also can create a lot of it. The whole idea is there should be a lot of excitement and enthusiasm. That's what a RevOps integrator, a RevOps champion would do, is create enthusiasm to where people are excited. The service team should walk away and say, wow, I have some more confidence now that the kind of contracts or clients or patients or customers we're going to be handed are going to be our ideal fits. Like, we're going to have our team doing their very best work or producing the very best product because we now have this alignment that we're going to get better stuff coming down the funnel towards us. Let's talk about marketing attribution. Marketing attribution for my fellow marketing nerds here today. You know that this can get really complicated. So please understand, my simplification here is not because I don't understand about the full complexities of marketing attribution, but what I want to communicate is that there needs to be at least some simple attribution taking place, which is to say you need to know which campaigns or efforts originate contacts, but you also need to know which campaigns or efforts influence contacts. I can't tell you how many organizations I talk to where the CEO says, well, this particular effort didn't originate a customer, so we're going to ditch it. We're going to ditch this ad campaign, or we're going to stop doing email. We're going to stop doing whatever. And what they don't realize is that if you have proper contact tracking in place and you have a proper CRM where you can see this, it'll start to reveal that, yes, maybe a Google ad originated the contact, but oh, by the way, they were retargeted on our social platform as well as traveling around the internet. They received several of our nurturing emails, right? Maybe we had some direct mail in the mix to start to nurture and surround them. There's so many things that go into the, how that person was touched. You need to know, like, what are the commonalities of those influencing efforts? Because the last thing you want to do is ditch something that's part of an influence effort, because more times than not, it takes seeing your brand, it takes seeing your messages multiple times. It's not just the one Google, ad that converted them into a database and then ultimately, they were knocking down your door. There are so many things that influence the contact. So it's really critical to understand. So yeah, minimum, you need to understand those two things when it comes to attribution. I talked about engagement history. So it's important that if your CRM doesn't do this, you need to start investigating a CRM that will. And that's the ability to see the entire engagement history for all contacts in your database, whether they're just new leads in the database because they downloaded something, or whether they're qualifieds and moving into opportunity, or whether they're customers and you're trying to turn them into fans. You need to be able to see the entire engagement history. And we're not talking about just email marketing, folks, which is what a lot of platforms do. They'll show you everything about email marketing, but they don't necessarily show you about their social engagement activity. They don't show you everything related to pages they visit on your site. They don't show you everything in one view with the deals that they've had associated, the products they've purchased, the support tickets around this contact. That's really critical, because in today's world, when you interact with people, they expect you to know everything about them, right? How unnerving is it to call the 1-800 number, enter all your credit card information and account information, and then the person answers the phone, and what do they ask? Anybody, what do they ask?
What's your name? What's your credit card?
There
Same
you
thing
go.
all over again. Yeah.
They ask you the same thing you just entered, right? It's ridiculous. And we get frustrated by this because we become so spoiled by this, right? We've become so, look, I even have this like stinking, like I'm back to wearing an Apple Watch. Like we're so spoiled, like everything's 2 taps away at our fingertips. And so this is really critical, because your competitors aren't just other people in your industry. Your competitors are people like Starbucks, because they create an experience where we are so spoiled. We just think everybody should deal with us this way. I've got this a company I'm dealing with. I just bought a home earlier this year from a national home builder, and I'm trying to get a warranty thing taken care of. So this nice lady leaves me a message. And so I got a call back. So I don't have time. So a few days later, I call back, I leave her a message, and then she calls back and leaves me a message. And so finally I say, hey, Beth, if you wouldn't mind, like, just text me and we can coordinate when we could talk and we can coordinate the issue. I've yet to get a text from Beth, right? And so I realized that, that's part of me being spoiled with like the way I want to be communicated with today. And so your clients are no different. Your patients, your students, your subscribers, what have you, they're no different. And it's really important that you know the information about them. So when they call and talk to you, you know what's been happening, especially with prospects, folks. When you engage a prospect and you say, hey, I see that you're really interested in solving this particular problem. I noticed you hadn't yet done this. Can I send that to you? Right now, you're addressing that person in a concierge-like manner. You want to be standardized on data, right? And so what you want to understand is, what's the minimum contact record criteria required for that record to exist? For that record to be handed off to sales, what's the minimum contact record criteria sales wants? When that record is handed off to operations, they begin servicing the client. What's the minimum contact record criteria that operations wants? Like, for example, we have this in our organization. If we turn somebody into a client and the sales team doesn't input who the accounts payable contact is for the client, our finance team is going to lose it, right? And so, because we've agreed, like, when clients come over, this amount of data will be present. So that's really critical that each team agrees on what will be passed to the next. And you also need to agree on what the life cycle stage criteria is. I mentioned this a moment ago. What makes someone an MQL? What makes someone an SQL? What makes someone an opportunity? What makes someone a fan? What's the criteria for that? All 3 teams need to hear that and agree upon that. And then finally, what triggers the transfer of contact ownership? So when will marketing hand it to sales for sales to own? When will sales hand it for ops to own? And when will ops get marketing back involved to try to help turn them into a fan? Like, all of these triggers are really These are simple things to define, but it's really important that the three teams get together and just agree on these things. And then finally, the alignment here is analytics. So you want to make sure that above and beyond quote unquote Google Analytics, you have if you want real revenue operations, you need revenue analytics, you need growth analytics, something that will show you across the entire life cycle, how things are progressing, where things come from, how long things take between milestones and stages, and so on. Who are the best sales reps? What are the best products? You're not going to get that level of data from a Google Analytics. Google Analytics is important for us marketing nerds to kind of drill in and analyze and dissect some things from a web standpoint. But to truly have revenue operations analytics, you need to see the entire life cycle of your base. And that's really critical. Because without that, the RevOps integrator actually can't do their job. The analytics are really critical to the RevOps integrator, because one of the main things the RevOps integrator is supposed to do is they're supposed to analyze the bottlenecks to growth on a regular basis, because that will help point the team in the direction of the bottlenecks, and then you develop your initiatives from there. And then finally, with alignment as your foundation, you want to make sure you deploy enablement features to now empower the team. And I'm going to go through this pretty quickly because the list of enablement features is a mile long, and we could discuss each feature, in great length. But my definition of enablement in this context is they're technological features that allow you to increase efficiencies and personalize interactions across marketing, sales, and service. And here's the key thing: at scale. That's what an enablement feature is, right? Personalization, efficiencies across marketing, sales, and service at scale. And so there are a number of different features that I'll touch on in marketing, sales, and service. Again, I'm not going to go through all these because we could be here all day just discussing features, but some of the things in marketing and around publishing and automation and SEO, sales, deal tracking, document library and tracking, meeting links, automation again, service, ticketing, knowledge base, surveys, live chat, automation again. You'll notice automation is a theme with a proper platform. I think oftentimes people hear automation, they think marketing automation, but sales automation exists, service automation exists. The underpinning of this, which is really critical, the thing that I think organizations need to really nail down, is what is the CRM, right? What is the core foundation to where we can see all that contact data and that engagement history and the activities that are going on, and in the lists that we're going to pull. That is kind of the underpinning of your enablement technologies. Because if you remember in the beginning, when I showed you all that tech, well, that's what's happening right now is people are just deploying everything on the top, and there's no underpinning. There's no glue that brings it all together. So that's really critical, because otherwise you'll just deploy all this tech and say, yeah, we should do live chat. And so you put live chat on your website. Yes, we should do meeting links. We should do, lead capture. You'll start doing all these things, and then you'll have sprawling tech. And so if you don't have a CRM to underpin it and bring it all together, it'll just create chaos. So this is really critical when it comes to enablement. Ken, how are we doing on time? Because I've got my last section here, and I need to know which parts I need to breeze through. And
yeah, we're good. We've got about 15 minutes.
Perfect. This is perfect. Okay, great. Thank you. Okay, finally, people. So we've aligned on process, right, gang? We've aligned on platform. Now we're going to align on people. So which people do we need to make RevOps come to life? I look at 4 core areas of your RevOps team, the people. There are strategy people, there are content people, there's engagement people, and then there are platform people, which is to say the technical, the implementation crowd. The strategy people are driving the overarching direction and program. They're analyzing data, and they're identifying bottlenecks. So when I talk about your RevOps integrator or your RevOps strategist, this is where they would sit. They would sit on the strategy team. And their primary job, direction, analysis, identify the bottlenecks, and help the team identify what the 90-day initiatives are to blast those bottlenecks. That's their primary role. That's their primary function. Not to be a project manager, not to be producing stuff. Their primary job are those things right there. This is why when earlier asked who does this, And is it part of someone else's job? This is why when you try to make this in addition to someone else's job, it doesn't necessarily happen really well, because this has a singular focus of doing these things, and it's not an also add on to someone else's job. Content. So what people are doing in content is they're making sure to develop and optimize the content offers that address those bottlenecks, right? So bottlenecks have been identified. Now for the 90-day period, the content team is focusing on content and offers to address those bottlenecks. And when I say content offers, just know that that's a broad, loose term, meaning if you identify that a knowledge base is a big gap in your customer support, and that's what's preventing your customers from turning into fans, then the development, the setup of the knowledge base and populating it is the content. Does that make sense? So when I say content, I don't just mean like a blog post or an ebook. Content has a very broad meaning here. It could be tools that you develop, like a template. It could be an analysis tool, et cetera. But it's meant to, what you're trying to do here is address the bottlenecks. And finally, once you do that, the engagement team, their job is to mobilize those content and offers so that way they're in front of the right people at the right time. And then once you do that, you have your platform team there as support to set up, maintain, and grow the tech to enable all of those activities and insights that the three previous teams need. Okay, so what would that look like? Here's an example if you were to build out an entire RevOps team across those four areas. Now, first thing I want to do, I don't want you to be scared in thinking like, oh, wow, Frank, like I need 15 people that I have to hire. No, you don't need 15 people. What you'll find is that you'll be able to have people on your existing team start to sit in some of these roles. The only person that you might not have is maybe your RevOps director or your RevOps strategist, but you already have a CEO or a GM. You already have a head of marketing, a head of sales. You already have a head of service. Those people need to be enlisted to join the strategy team as part of the RevOps team. You already have subject matter experts, for example. Those people need to be willing to participate in the content team, because I will tell you, if you try to outsource your thought leadership, that doesn't work too well. The thought leadership, the technical information about what you do needs to come from within your four walls. That's going to require that your subject matter experts are willing participants in the process. There's nothing worse than asking the engineer if they can spend 30 minutes being interviewed, so that way you can glean some insights and share with the marketplace, and that engineer just bemoaning the request and thinks it's a waste of his or her time and not wanting to participate. That's not good. That's not how you're going to expose your differentiation and how you folks do what you do. And so again, I'm not going to go through every one of these roles. The idea is that you should be able to use people on your team to fill in most of these roles. And then what you might be left with is, hey, we need to have a RevOps director / integrator, and we should probably have some content help and maybe some technical implementation help. Like you might come down to identifying 2.5 FTEs, if you will. Certainly most of these people already exist on your team. Okay, so let's talk about how you can take action. So how can you lead the charge in your organization, create that culture of revenue, and start crushing your competition? So let's talk about a few things you can do. First thing you can do is conduct an audit. And so what I want you to do is I want you to get together with the head of sales, the head of marketing, and the head of service. And I want you to sit down and start asking the questions that I identified earlier. Are we aligned? Do we all understand who our best buyer personas are? Do we all understand what our best offering is? Is marketing aware of what operations KPIs are? What does the COO, the GM, CEO, what are they holding that team accountable to? Is it GP? Is it retention? Is it number of repeat buys? Is it account growth? What is it? Oftentimes I find marketing teams don't ever even know what operations is accountable for. And so start to ask those questions, get that team together, conduct an audit, find out what's happening. Who are the best customers? Who are the worst customers? What are the best offerings? What's our throughput needed to be able to support our growth objectives? And find out exactly what's going on. Take a look at your tech too and find out, where is our tech helping us and where is our tech hurting us? Where is our tech non-existent? Right? So go through that and do a process platform people audit and just start asking some basic questions. Like you don't have to at my firm, we do a pretty formal process for this, but you don't have to do that if you want to start self-implementing on your own. Like just ask basic questions across process, platform, people, but include marketing, sales, and service in that. Make sure that's happening together. The next thing you can do is assign who the RevOps champion or the integrator is going to be. Who is that person that's going to be ultimately responsible? Now I mentioned it's not great if it's an also add-on to someone else's job, but if you have no choice, you've got to start somewhere. Okay. So that's the ideal state. But again, if you don't have that, start somewhere. That might be the head of marketing, might be the head of sales. It might be the GM, the COO takes it on. Maybe that's who the RevOps champion is. And so make sure that person is identified and it's known that this person's going to be responsible for bringing marketing, sales, and service teams together across process, platform, and people once and for all. They're going to be doing the analysis. They're going to help identify the bottlenecks. They're going to help identify the initiatives to address those bottlenecks. You need someone who's a champion on this. And then finally, meet monthly. Meet every single month to review what's happening, how's performance, what's working, what's not working. Give a status update on those initiatives, right? If you just start doing this, if you just start holding a RevOps monthly meeting and making sure you're on the same page, I promise you're going to see improvements with what you're doing. It may be with efficiencies. It may be, and eventually will be, direct revenue impact, profitability impact. You're going to start to see some really awesome impacts if you just get on the same page, meet monthly, and commit that you're no longer a siloed marketing, sales, and service team. You're a unified powerhouse RevOps team.
Frank, question for you as far as the goals, right? Everybody, maybe this is going to come up in the end here, but in terms of the goal, right? Any business leader is only going to champion or support an initiative that has a definite KPI number. You talked about seeing results, some results, an uptick in 6, 12, 18, 24 months. What's kind of a realistic expectation for these businesses? We're going to bump sales or market share by 5% in the first year. I know it's going to be, depending upon, the situation in the company, but is there a realistic expectation that you would recommend?
So I'll go back to the stat that HubSpot has analyzed across many, many companies. And what they're saying is when there's a true RevOps function and it's consistent and there's a real effort there, they see a 26% increase in revenue growth. So that's a pretty
sizable.
If you want to lean on a stat, that's probably the best one I would lean on. What I would say is it's all about 90-day phases. And so, first phase is really about foundation, right? It's gaining clarity and understanding, gaining direction. Second phase is to start to make your first attempts at blasting bottlenecks. Start to see, how did we do? Because really what you're looking for in that second phase of execution, where you're working together to address a bottleneck, what you're really looking for is what are we learning about working together? What are we learning about what's working and what's not? You're going to see improvements. Hopefully you're seeing improvements based on the initiative you defined, and hopefully the initiative is successful. But oftentimes some of those initiatives early on are meant to just kind of set the stage and fix a deep problem, which you might have several others to fix before it starts to bubble up and now create a groundswell of either profitability increase or revenue increase. But definitely during your first, the second phase, which is really your first execution phase of attacking a bottleneck, you're really just starting to get in the rhythm of process. Then when you go into that third 90-day cycle, you should be a bit more well-oiled, and you should start to see fruit starting to come of it in that third 90 days. And then in the fourth 90 days, you'll start to see a lot more. And again, it really varies, because what you might identify again is as I mentioned earlier, you might identify that, we really have a bottleneck in turning our customers into fans. Well, okay, what are the KPIs around that? How do we know? Well, we know that our gross profit, which is our number one KPI, is down and it's trending down. Okay, what are some of the metrics? What are some of the indicators? Okay, well, our retention is at 78% month over month. Okay, there's a clue. Okay, our referrals that we're getting are down. All right, there's another clue. So you start to look at your metrics as clues. And then what you're going to do is then you're going to start to hypothesize about what the problem is. And as you start to investigate your hypothesis, you'll then come up with a plan to address that bottleneck. And so then you'll put that plan in place over the next 90 days. And so that plan might be, you know what, sorry, my Siri thought I was talking to her. And so what you might find is that you have to implement a better onboarding experience. You might have to implement a better knowledge support base, and then you need a better ticketing support system. You might identify that those are the things that are big missing gaps. Whereas like if you take the typical like marketing campaign approach, marketing campaigns are almost always meant to address the new. We're going to go get new eyeballs. We're going to go get new, and you obsess over that. But if on the other end, your retention sucks, which is affecting your gross profit KPI, then you're going to like bring in more input, which is always the most expensive part of the process. And you're not optimizing for the output. And so that's why the timeframes will radically vary based on the organization's bottlenecks. You might have an organization where you do an amazing job with retention/repeat buys, which affects the KPI, and their KPI is either going to be revenue or something profit related, right? And so you might be doing an amazing job there, but people are falling out in the sales process. You know, you're only closing 12% of your real opportunities. That's a massive glaring bottleneck. And so then you would deploy the time and effort there. And so it can vary greatly. And I didn't mean to give a long-winded message. So hopefully that helps, that it's going to really vary based on, you know, where the bottleneck is in your organization. But literally within that first, realistically within that first year, you should really start to see some things snowball. You'll start to see real changes happen. Okay, cool. So last thing I want to share with you folks is a number of the assets I showed you today are from a blueprint that that we have, where it can help you identify your buyer persona focused campaigns, the content, engagement activities in one easy to understand view of everything I talked about today. It's just that one piece of the process where we talked about buyer personas and relationship driven experience. It's not for the entire RevOps function. But if you'd like that one tool that I showed you, I want to give that to you. It's a document that looks like this, where you can identify that relationship driven experience and who the buyer persona is, as well as learn more about the book that talks a lot about the strategic approach that we talked about today. You can get that and learn more about the book at buildingyourdigitalutopia.com. I'd encourage you to go there. There's several free things for you guys to grab. The blueprint, there's our podcast, plus more stuff coming. And then you can learn about the book as well. Buildingyourdigitalutopia.com. Go check that out. Would love for you to grab a copy of that and let me know what you think. And finally, just an offer to help. If you'd like to help, with your RevOps strategy with no sales pressure, no sales pitch, but you just want to talk after today and figure out, could this be possible in our organization? With how our marketing, sales, and service teams are built and what we're selling and who we're selling it to, is what you described something that could work in our organization? I'll help you answer that one question just in a free RevOps strategy session. Again, no sales pitch, but if you'd like to just talk about it further, I'm happy to do that. Just email me and say, I'm ready to do this. I have no funnel to put you in. I have no landing page and squeeze page to get you in on. Just email me, frank@digitopia.agency, and just say, hey, yeah, let's just, please look at my RevOps, potential. And I'll just give you an honest assessment. And if you wanted to talk further, that's going to be completely up to you. No sales pitch, but just an offer to help as something I do for people who attend my talks.
And Frank, you said earlier that we can make this presentation available to all the folks that were on today. Will you send me a copy or someone to Elaine? Is that okay?
Yeah, or if you guys have it recorded, feel free to share the recording as well. And I could also export the deck to PDF if you want. Okay,
great. Perfect. Thank you for that.
And so that's what I've got for you folks today. So I'm super excited about this topic. It's a big topic that's emerging right now. Again, I think you'll find if you start investigating it, it's really thin right now in terms of, what it means beyond the definitions. Like I pointed to a Forbes article. That's a great article, and there's a number of pieces like it. But beyond that, there really isn't a lot of meat out there. So that's what, we're on a mission to do, is really provide the meat. How do you go about doing this? And what is an approach you can start taking to start actually implementing this stuff, rather than talking about the idea of it. So hopefully this was helpful for you guys. I know there was a lot to unpack there, but again, if you have additional questions and you wanted to chat about it or just connect with me, my info is there, and would love to hear from you guys afterwards.
Wonderful. Well, if we were in a live setting, there would be a lot of clapping right now. So let me tell you, Frank, that was fantastic. It was very, very well laid out. It is something that we've dealt with our clients also, trying to bring people in. They've called it sales ops, sales enablement, RevOps. It's all part of that up and coming trend, which is sorely needed out there. So thank you for laying out that blueprint so clearly and so effectively. So like Frank said, if you have any other questions, feel free to reach out to him. I have found Frank to always be accessible and willing to talk and network. So reach out to him, not all at the same exact time, but certainly stagger your messages to him, and I'm sure he'll be more than happy to help you as well. Other questions about our group, SMLA, let me know, or let Elaine know. We're happy to keep you involved as well. We will be sending out the recording later on today as well. So thank you for making that available, Frank. That's fantastic. We encourage you to go to our site also. It's salesmarketingalliance.com. There's only one more event left before the end of the year, and that'll be on November 11th. We have a panel coming up talking about trends to be prepared for 2021 for business owners. So we'll see you all next month. And if you haven't already, please go out and vote. And thanks a lot for being here this morning. And especially thank you to Frank. It was wonderful.
Yeah, thanks for having me, Ken. It was great to be here with you folks. It was nice to meet the people who I've met. And you guys have an awesome day and have an awesome week.
You too. Thanks so much, Frank. Appreciate it.
Take care. Bye-bye.
Thanks, everyone. Have a good day. Bye-bye.
Bye.